Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 131. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here on this Friday. Steelers Nation, Dave, we're in this rare part of the NFL cycle where there's not a whole lot going on. There's stuff happening on the horizon. Next week will probably be pretty active with OTAs starting Tuesday and potentially maybe a new GM known by the end of next week, maybe. But for now, things pretty quiet.
Yeah, look, we don't get many of these during the year. I probably should have took my vacation this week instead of last week, because last weekend was the rookie mini camp and all. And there's been absolutely nothing going on really outside of thank goodness for the GM interviews going on right now, because if not for that, probably wouldn't have much of anything to talk about today. And obviously, oh, by the way, and Alex's birthday is Saturday, so make sure you holler at him, wish him happy birthday. You're going to a Pirates game tonight and then a Pirates game on Saturday, right? Those tickets hard to get?
No, surprisingly, they're giving them away, it feels like.
Oh, okay. You gonna sit behind the home plate or whatnot so I can make fun of you and make gifts of you and all?
Is that what you're gonna do? Is that how you're gonna spend your Friday night?
I might. I mean, things get pretty exciting around here at the old Vegas Metroplex. So it should be a good time for you there overall, and happy birthday to you there. So
thank you.
What are you, like 8 now? 29?
29. I'll be 29 Saturday.
All right.
Last of the 20s.
All right. Where were we? GM search.
Yeah. So GM search, not a whole lot new. I mean, we've known since last week the 6 guys that were coming in for 6 interviews, and I presume there aren't going to be any additional names based on the reporting, kind of the way this thing has gone. But we now know some of the actual days that these guys have interviewed. Brandon Hunt interviewing on Thursday, Andy Weidel, I believe, interviewing on Wednesday, Omar Khan, I think it was Tuesday, but those 3 have interviewed this week. The other 3, Doug Whaley, John Spytek, and Ryan Cowden, interviewing last week. And so ESPN's Jeremy Fowler late on Thursday night put out a tweet, and I'll read the whole thing verbatim here. Quote, Steelers are wrapping up GM interviews this week. They might already be done, with Brandon Hunt the last of the 6 known finalists to interview, but Pittsburgh's plan is to have that process done by this week and then work on next steps, I'm told, getting closer, end quote. And so unless an interview comes in tomorrow that has been totally under the radar, which I doubt is going to happen, those should be your 6. So one of those 6 should be the next GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah,
look, and it's hard to handicap this thing at this point. I tell you what, I'm glad Doug Whaley's not in the group. Can you imagine him being chosen as the next GM on the heels of him saying some of the things that he said, more specifically some things recently about Jack Ham and all like that? I mean, you want to talk about coming under fire quick with the media, but it doesn't sound like he's in this. And I think,
he had a second interview, though. He's one of the 6.
Oh, okay. I mean, what am I thinking here? I'm thinking of the Riddick not getting the interview there. But okay. With Whaley, let me take that back then and backpedal. I hope Whaley doesn't get it on the heels of what he said about Jack Ham. I was thinking I had Louis Riddick on my mind for some reason. Louis Riddick was in the news day before yesterday, going to re-up with ESPN. I think he confirmed to a local TV reporter that he was indeed out of the running. So I had the 2 mixed up there. But with Whaley, I mean, you would think that he's the least likely, I would think, right? To get this?
As you said, it's hard to rank them. My guess is that he's not going to get the job. That's easy to say. I suppose I have a 1 in 6 chance, or a 5 in 6 chance, I should say, of being right. But I mean, they know him. You obviously have the internal candidates in Hunt and Khan, but the guy that they know pretty well is Doug Whaley, who's with the team for a decade and has GM experience. And if they value that already, in his pocket, who the heck knows, I guess is my answer.
Yeah, look, and once again, it would be quite comical right out of the shoot with him to have to answer for some of these things. To me, he's another one of those. I think we've talked about this before. I'd much rather, this job go to someone who, doesn't have much of hasn't had much, excuse me, much of a presence out there most recently. Whaley's on the radio. It seems like every other week, obviously. Excuse me, I'm coming out off this sickness here still, folks. With Louis Riddick, obviously still, coming off of the TV gig and all like that. Both those guys have been out there. Louis Riddick, in so many words, had to back or be real careful with some of the things he said during the draft, I think, because of potentially still being in the running for the job at the time. So it just, with Riddick and guys like Whaley, I think they're just too out there in the media already. I'd much rather, if it was my choice, to be somebody that is not out there in the public, that doesn't have words that can be hung by the tongue, at this point here. And I don't know about you, I haven't been overly impressed with Whaley's history, time in Buffalo and all like that there. So I would personally think that, at least in my own odds making mind, I would say Doug Whaley, I would think, would probably be one of the least likely to get the job here.
If you had to make me guess who the quote unquote front runners are, and again, this is just a total guess, and who knows, these are all, any of the six could be the guy, but I think it's either Brandon Hunt or Andy Weidel. I just think those guys have very similar paths and resumes to Kevin Colbert, which is going to be attractive to Art Rooney. They're both grew up in Pittsburgh. Hunt was born in California, but grew up in Pittsburgh. They both, obviously, Hunt works for the Steelers. Weidel's first NFL job was with Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. They've taken the pro personnel, area scout, college scout, the pro personnel department kind of path, which is what Colbert did. He was a Blesto scout and was a pro scout, and then worked his way up as a personnel director, and then got hired by Pittsburgh to be their GM or vice president of football operations. They called it till 2010. But I will say, I thought Whaley's comments about, Ham were kind of silly, and it's just old and tired and trite to say, but I'm not going to not hire a guy because he's got some antiquated thoughts about whether or not Jack Ham could play in today's NFL. I think the job is so much more than one stray silly comment.
Yeah. And I'm not just singling that out. Oh, it's just the most recent thing. I mean, he's been on, once again on 93.7 The Fan, and you could spend a day going back through some of those interviews that he's done and pick out the trash from that and have fun with it on him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean,
I just feel like he's an easy target. Is what I'm saying. And plus, on top of it, like I said, I wasn't overly impressed about his time in Buffalo either. There, so for a while there, I thought, man, there's no way that this is not going to be Brandon Hunt. For a long while there. When you look at Andy, obviously in his history and links back to the Steelers, and if it's not Brandon Hunt, yeah, I'm leaning that way with Andy Weidel as well too. At this point here, I mean, he's done his time in the Eagles organization. I think before that he worked with Ozzie and them in Baltimore scouting for them. So he's seems to be very, very well rounded, and obviously being a Pittsburgh guy, having his roots in Pittsburgh anyway, it's not gonna hurt him either. So people will say, are you reading into anything on the order that these things are being done? And I mean, we'll be able to do it maybe after the fact, right? Because it seems like Brandon Hunt was the last one in, and if he is indeed the one, then maybe we can look back at this and they brought him in, and maybe in the order of their finish, or I don't know, but it is hard to handicap this at this point now, and especially for a long time, I thought it was going to be Brandon Hunt slam dunk, and now you have to wonder if Brandon Hunt does not get this job, what might happen to him, what's going to happen to Omar Khan, is Weidel going to come in and have maybe his own type of guys? What's going to happen to the rest of the scouting department? I think you wrote about that on Steelers Depot on Thursday morning there. I mean, we could have a huge shift in the whole mechanism here, if you will. And normally, normally guys like to bring in their guys, so it's going to be interesting to watch play out. I guess I'm leaning towards Hunt because I don't want to see too much change in the process. I think it's more of a selfish thing,
right.
On my own part, because we've learned and tracked Kevin Colbert for so long. And some people say, well, Dave, that's a good enough reason not to go with Brandon Hunt. Maybe get some things changed up here. But you would hope, though, that whoever the person is someone that maybe you could get. I wouldn't expect another 20-year run, like the team had with Kevin Colbert. But I would think a good 10 year run at a minimum is what you're kind of hoping for here. And it does look like they've gone through a thorough process here. Obviously, Kevin Colbert helping, picking out guys to interview. And obviously this is Art Rooney II's first time having to go through this process as well too, because remember it was Dan's doing last time this thing around. So this is all new for Art Rooney as well too. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. I wouldn't think it would take much time from this point forward. I don't think, I would like to think that Art Rooney's got a pretty good idea who that person is. And, with OTAs starting, on Tuesday of next week, what you kind of want to get this thing put to bed maybe by this weekend?
Honestly, I don't think OTAs is going to impact that too incredibly much, especially because there's going to be several more later in May and then the mandatory minicamp in June. I would interview these guys 10 times. I wouldn't do maybe they have other interviews occasionally and they call people and they're not formal interviews. I know that happened with Bill Cowher, but this is such a critical position. The guy that you said hopefully is running your team for 10 plus years. I would interview these guys 10 times just to know as much as you possibly can know before making a decision. I'll say a couple things. I don't have any quote directly in front of me, but Kevin Colbert has sort of kind of, to me, this is a little tinfoil hatty I borrowed from you, Dave, but made some references to that would kind of imply it's going to be an outside hire. I forget some of the language Colbert's used, but some of it's like, whenever the next guy comes in, we'll have to kind of explain to him how things work. It's something to that effect, just something that seemed to maybe subconsciously hinted at an outside hire. I will say, not that Pittsburgh has had many GMs lately, but their last two GMs have both been literally from Pittsburgh. Kevin Colbert from Pittsburgh and Tom Donahoe was from out Lebanon. And so it's interesting there. They really like those Pittsburgh ties and roots. And again, Hunt and Weidl both have those. But I don't want to also discount the guys that we haven't talked about as much. John Spytek, Ryan Cowden. Mike Tomlin was a guy we didn't think really, I'm speaking broadly here, but didn't really think was going to be the front runner. The guy was going to be Russ Grimm or someone like that. And he kind of comes out of nowhere and surprises people. So if it was a Cowden or Spytek, who the heck knows? I don't want to say that those guys have no shot either.
How much does it mean that the new person be able to work well with Mike Tomlin, or is that just something that Mike Tomlin's going to have to be able to do? How much input do you think Mike Tomlin has, if any, on this process?
Well, he certainly will have input. Again, it's Art Rooney's. He makes the final decision here, but I think being able to work well with Tomlin is the number one criteria in terms of who you're going to hire. Because if your GM and head coach can't work well together, and we've seen how well Tomlin and Colbert have worked together since 2007, if those guys can't mesh well, everything else falls apart. I mean, there've been so many times. You think about this past year, Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman, they weren't even talking to each other for the last month or two. You're just not going to be a good organization whenever you have an icy relationship at the top. Pittsburgh knows that with Donahoe and Cowher, and that obviously one of them had to go, ended up being Donahoe. So to me, that is more critical than anything else. And how do you scout, and what's your scouting report look like, and your philosophy, draft versus free agency? How well will you work with the head coach, especially one as established as Mike Tomlin is number one.
And Tomlin's talked several times about he can't pay any attention to any, obviously he probably watches his share of college ball throughout the year when he can. But Tomlin's talked several times how he's really, come Senior Bowl time, he's really have to be brought up to speed very quickly, on this, and how Kevin over the years has played a big part in doing that. And they've worked together this long now that they know the kind of players that they both kind of like, and that kind of thing there. And it's got to be more than just having one guy buying the groceries, if you will, and let the other guy just learn how to cook with it, on the run there. So I would think that, you might want to at least run it by Mike Tomlin to some degree. And, what are the duties going to be? Who's going to have final decisions on the roster and those kind of things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Tomlin's been sitting in the second round of interviews, so obviously he's going to play a role in evaluating, and I'm sure Rooney's going to, lean on him for input. Again, Rooney makes the final decision, but I'm sure Tomlin will have a sway. You wonder, will Tomlin's influence grow even more? Because whoever comes in is going to be either external or a first-time GM, even if it's internal with Hunter Kahn. And I think it's hard to believe that Tomlin won't kind of have the power skills tipped in his favor a little bit, because there were very few guys that have been here longer than Mike Tomlin, but Kevin Colbert was one of those guys. And so I think Tomlin's power, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but just kind of as a matter of fact, is going to grow a bit regardless of who the new GM is.
And will the new GM be told that, as part of the process that Mike Tomlin's going to have this much say on this certain things? I would want kind of all that stuff outlined, for sure. And, we've seen it in the past too, over the years, that, a new guy comes in, new general manager, whatnot. And, you start seeing shipping off of the guys that the previous general manager brought in. Now, I don't think obviously it'll be that drastic in Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh really builds through the draft, and that's the philosophy, and that philosophy is not going to change whoever the new GM is. Whereas you see, around the league, these other teams that don't build so heavily through the draft, that maybe go heavy into the free agency process. Those free agents, are usually sent, a good portion of them are sent out the door when the new general manager comes in, kind of thing there. So, and that's what's made this transition kind of unique too, is because, man, you have the new GM coming in on the heels of right after a draft takes place,
right. And a monumentally important draft,
right,
with Kenny Pickett being selected.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is that kind of draft where, man, Kevin Colbert's talked about it. You can't miss on those first couple of draft picks any year, and you most definitely can't miss on them when your first round draft pick is hopefully your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years, because you just see, I mean, we've seen the Steelers in the past, chase their tail for years and years after Bradshaw, before they came on, been there. And you obviously don't want a repeat of that. But on the flip side, you've got to be committed to this new quarterback for at least a couple, 2 or 3 years, because of the investment that you have in the player there. So it's just going to be an interesting dynamic all the way around. And at this point, I'm just a spectator at this point now. I'd like to see Brandon Hunt get it, but I'm not going to be, there's not going to be any TVs broken in my house or anything like that. Maybe if Whaley gets it, maybe, but
a lamp will go.
Right. Maybe a lamp will go or something like that. But, overall, I'm because this is new to us,
It's new to everybody.
I mean, this is new. I mean, since Steelers Depot has been around, Mike Tomlin's been the head coach, and Kevin Colbert's been the GM. So this is new territory for you and I, and really me in a whole as covering the team since 2008. So
right, same with the quarterback. First time we had to talk about a first-time quarterback in Depot's existence.
Absolutely. So it's going to be fun to watch the rest of this play out, and whoever the new choice is will, if it is an outsider out, I mean, obviously we know a lot about Hunt and Omar Khan at this point, but if it's somebody else from the outside, then, we'll do a lot of deeping into the history of that person and all like that. But we really won't get, a good feeling of who this new GM is until they go through a pre-draft process or two, really.
Right. I was going to say, hopefully the new GM likes Pickett, because that's the guy you're tied to for the next 3-4 years. And I'm sure every GM in there is saying, we love Pickett. It was a great pick. We're going to work with this guy, because what else can you say? You can't say you don't like the guy, because you're not going to get the job probably. So hopefully that happens. That's the reason why I was critical of the team waiting until post-draft to do this, to replace Colbert, because it's such an important offseason, and you just hope the new guy likes him. He's going to have to. He really doesn't have a choice here. A couple of things I'll say. with Brandon Hunt, if he does not get the job for Pittsburgh, he's gone. I mean, maybe not this offseason, although potentially go to Buffalo. He's interviewed for the assistant GM job there. That's still open, but he'll be gone by next year, I think, if he does not get the job here. He wants to be a GM someday. I think he will be a GM someday. There'll be no upward mobility in Pittsburgh. He'll be snubbed by what we thought was going to be kind of the heir to Colbert's spot. And so I think if you do not hire Brandon Hunt, he'll be elsewhere this time next year.
And what's going to happen to Khan, at this point? I mean,
right?
If Khan can't get a job at this point, in his own backyard, what does the future hold for him overall? Is he just going to be the salary cap guy from here on out? And is the new GM going to have different ideas on contracts and things along those nature and ideas about restructures? Because let's face it, if I can keep the Steelers salary cap sitting here in my mom's basement in Las Vegas, I'm not saying that anybody can do the job, but there are pretty much parameters at this point. You could probably put a lot of this into an Excel, into a computer program, and it spit out half the details for you.
Yeah, but there's a people element to this as well, because he's involved in negotiations, and I think there's a human element to this job as well.
Yeah, as long as the human has money. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I think that's where it starts. And I'm not discrediting Omar Khan, but oftentimes, because I've learned so much about the cap and CBA and the process and contracts and all that over the years, it's not this magical of a wand waving as people probably make it out to be. It's pretty standard cut and dry stuff nowadays, and the Steelers were just in a situation for so long with working with a franchise quarterback on a constant franchise contract that the annual restructures became a thing. I mean, it became highly predictable. And the only thing that the only part of the phase maybe that we're getting into now that's a little less predictable when it comes to the whole process with, say, Omar Khan's job is really the negotiation with the guaranteed money with these high-end guys like the TJ Watt last year, breaking new ground for non-quarterbacks with the Steelers. We're going to see if it holds serve later this summer with a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick as well, too. You think it would, but I guess what I'm getting at is, what makes Omar Khan all that special now at this point if he can't get the GM job this time around?
Sure, I understand that, and he's obviously been close to other GM jobs, and it unfortunately, hasn't happened for him. But I just to the bigger point, I wrote the article today, the forgotten factor of the Steelers' next GM hire, or yesterday. We're recording this Thursday night for those unaware. If it is an external hire, if it is somebody from the outside, how much does that change just the overall front office? Because we focus so much on the continuity of Tomlin's been here since 2007. Colbert's been in Pittsburgh since 2000. These scouts have been here collectively. The core group of Steelers scouts and top front office guys have been in Pittsburgh alone a combined 214 years. And you have some guys like Phil Kryler, who's been here since the mid 90s. He's going in on year number 32. I believe. And so the quote unquote least tenured core guy in this front office on the scouting staff is Rick Reprieve, who's been here for only 8 years. And so could you have major turnover there, as you mentioned a little bit ago? You probably will have some level of it. And so that's going to be the underrated aspect of how much turnover you're going to have. Not only are you going to have it at GM and your quarterback and your defensive coordinator, and even the team's chief financial officer is retiring this year, probably already retired, Bob Tyler. You have a lot of key changes there, and the scouting staff on top of that would be another really big one that would totally upend how this team operates and our ability to predict how this team operates.
And look, I mean, if you're going to make some change, you better make some change, right? I mean, you would expect there to be change at the scouting end of it.
Sure. If it's a new GM, yeah, they're going to bring in a guy like if Andy Weidl gets hired, he's hiring his brother Casey, who got fired in Philadelphia. Like that guy for sure is coming in.
Right. And I guess the only other kind of question is, Kevin Colbert's hinted more than a couple of times that he might stay on in some capacity. And what's that going to look like?
Yeah, I think it'll be like what Ozzie Newsome does in Baltimore as an advisory role. I think that'll be fine. I think that won't be an issue. But if you want to get rid of Colbert's guys, maybe it's a bit of an issue. I don't know.
Because and that's what I'm kind of getting at there. If Colbert's still around, I mean, what's going to happen to Dan Colbert?
Yeah, sure.
You can stay, but your brother's got to go. But you see what I'm getting at? Me, if you're going to make changes on the outside, you would expect changes on below on that, especially if you want different results. And there are people probably yelling at this podcast early on saying, look, change, we don't want people from the inside. That's the problem with this thing. We need, complete change within the way the organization does things, especially at the scouting level. Now, I don't think you're going to see any drastic change in the free agency aspect. I just think from a organizational concept standpoint, that the Steelers are not going to get away from building through the draft and not free agency. I don't think that's going to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this year was obviously a bit different, though. Even with Colbert, they were certainly more spendy than they had been because they had the ability to do so. And
they did, and we kind of predicted they would, but they still didn't go overboard in any aspect of it, and we predicted they wouldn't do that either. I mean, the highest outsider was what, Bradley?
James Daniels.
I mean, Daniels.
Yeah, he was like 3 years, I think $27 million. So yeah, there was no J.C. Jackson $80 million giant contract.
I'm thinking Bradley because Bradley just signed with the Eagles. I got him on my mind. Plus, I'm sick.
So no, I think you're right about that. I mean, I will say, and I've listened to some of these new GM interviews this past year just because I wanted to hear what new guys say. Every single one of them says we build through the draft, and then most of them don't, and they just go spend $1 million, $1 million in free agency. But I expect in Pittsburgh, I mean, that core principle will be the same because Tomlin's still here, Rooney's are still here. That's how this thing's been built since Noel, and starting in '69. So I don't think that's going to change. But the question is, what does change then?
I would just think maybe you deal with more analytics. I guess maybe you take more chances on the less squeaky clean kind of guys. That's really I don't mind them being on the sparky level, and it's always been kind of I mean, they like athletic dudes, and who doesn't in the NFL and all like that. But maybe they will get more into the new age analytic aspects of this, and going that way. Maybe they'll be willing to go take more chances on smaller school guys.
Mm-hmm.
That would obviously be a little bit of a different change for them. Now, obviously, it didn't work out so well, pre-Colbert, that way a lot of the times. But times are obviously different now too. The game of college football has changed dramatically since well before Colbert arrived.
Right. The access to those small school guys, it's easier to see those guys, know those guys now. And so that's a good point. And again, but how much does change? Because Tomlin's still here and he's still old school, and he's not going to be the guy looking at spreadsheets and posting all these advanced numbers, but it'll be interesting. So it's hard to say for sure. But there will be changes. I think analytics are going to be heavier in that, especially in the college game, the draft evaluation process. I think you're right. Could you see that small school window open? Possibly. Could it take more risks? Because they don't, if you have a character issue at all, they don't take you. I know Pickens was some debate there, but generally speaking, this team, since Mike Adams, Martavis Bryant, they've drafted Harts and Smarts, squeaky clean guys. And so will that change? It could. That's why we could roll out a Devontae White, even though he fit. We knew he's not going to be in play because he's got the domestic issues, the red flags. And so all that could be out the window going forward, which makes our job a lot tougher.
Right. How many games, I would like to ask hook Kevin Colbert up to the lie detector machine whenever we, should we be fortunate enough to get him on the show post his Steeler days and all like that. How many games do you think he watches of X amount of players, Because let me tell you, I'll tell you right now, if I had that job, you would have a hard time getting, it'd be like I am now. It'd be a hard time getting me off the tape, man, because I would want to watch as much damn tape as I could of these kids. I mean, the analytics are fine. Obviously, you can tell a lot by height, weight, speed, and all that kind of stuff. But man, there's, 3 games is fine. 8 games is even better, watching that, because, the further you get into that tape sometimes, the more you obviously can tell about these players. And that's why I've constantly had the running joke that I think Kevin Colbert has like 25 guys that he looks to draft every year and kind of pulls from that list. I just, you have to put a lot of trust in your scouts,
Mm-hmm. That's why they've been around so much, because you trust them, completely.
All right. So what's wrong with the process then that, these Steelers haven't won a playoff game since in many moons?
That's a good question. I don't think they've done a bad job from a draft perspective. Maybe there's been a couple more misses in relatively recent years. Artie, Jarvis, Edmonds isn't in that category, but he wasn't a slam dunk hit. Devin Bush just had the injury. It's been a lot of things. It's probably hard for us to answer that question. Why has this team struggled as much as they have? So, in a quick, clean, neat soundbite, I will say the division has just gotten tougher as well. No longer are the Browns winning 2 games a year, and the Bengals in the basement as well. It's a super competitive division. So that's a more recent thing, but that's impacted things probably the last year or two.
Is that you going back to the pack, or is that the pack catching up to you?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both, probably, but probably more the latter of the pack catching up to you. You don't have kind of your gimme games against the Browns and Bengals. It's now everyone's going to be within a couple games of each other, and so that's one element of it. But from a philosophical draft standpoint, I think they've still done a good job. I mean, you look at the 2017 class, for example. That was a great class. I think they've done pretty well even in more recent draft classes.
I mean, it's getting to a point now where the old T-shirt of never finishing below 500, that's kind of gotten stale now.
Mm-hmm. It's always been stale to me. It's not the Steelers standard to go 500. I mean, that's not they don't hang banners for that. They put trophies in a trophy case, and so that's got to be the focus.
Right, and I mean, it's been a long time since they've even come close to putting a trophy in that trophy case. So,
right,
and Art Rooney's got to get that monkey off his back. I mean,
yeah. Dan won. Yeah.
That's his legacy,
Two.
Yeah. At this point, and Art Rooney's not getting any younger. So yeah, I'd be interviewing the snot out of these guys right now and wondering, part of that interview process would be what's going to go on underneath you, with the scouts and all like that. And are there going to be any sweeping changes to different than what we do business now, and how much we'll talk, there's a lot that goes into this, because
mm-hmm.
you just don't want a dictator coming in either and saying, this is the way it's going to be. I make all the decisions around here and go that way either,
Sure. And I'm sure that's not going to happen, but, and I'm sure all those questions about what your plan is, that's what the second interview was for. Colbert said the first interview was kind of more build the list, get to know some of these guys. And the second one was the serious nuts and bolts. How will this team work within your vision? And so I'm sure that's going on, but it's hard to do that with one couple hours sit down interview over dinner or whatever. I mean, that's why I think you got to talk to these guys. And it's not like there's a super urgent rush to do it. We're in May. There's not much happening right now. It's not like it's after the season. You got, Senior Bowl coming up and draft prep and free agency prep, and you really want to get a hire done in a couple weeks, and you're competing with other teams for their GM hires as well.
But wouldn't you want your new GM in place to be at these OTA practices and start seeing that part of the process and evaluating players?
It's nice and you'd like it, but if it comes at the expense of rushing into a decision, then you don't want that. And so I think it's better to wait and make sure you really feel like you know the guy that you're going to hire and you're comfortable with that than getting him in before some, shells and shorts practices.
Yeah, I'd like to think they have all the info that they need to make by this point.
Right. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know, but I assume a decision will be made by this time next week.
I would like to think it'd be made by Monday, but might not be.
Yeah, so we'll see and we'll cover it. And obviously, if it's an external guy, we'll try to learn as much as we can. If it's an internal guy, we'll have to learn more because it's not like we know that much about Brandon Hunt or Omar Khan. Right. We know some, but it's not like they have a track record of them in charge that we can really look at. And a lot of this, frankly, will be us learning along the way because unless it's Doug Whaley, it's going to be a new GM who's never been in that position before. And it's really hard to kind of suss out what their style is until they start actually making the big decisions.
Aren't most of the scouts, don't their contracts end middle of May or after the draft? Or do you think the Steelers run them through the end of May?
No, I'll contracts run through after the draft. That's why you see turnover now, a lot of scouts shuffling. Now, are they 1-year contracts? They're probably not all 1-year contracts. So some probably go through next year because they're multi-year contracts, but I'm sure some are ending at the end of this year. I know Rick Capricious is his last year. He's kind of getting up there in age. So yes, typically speaking, you see the scout turnover and you're seeing that league wide right now post-draft because you can't do it in January because you've already gotten your draft process done and you can't have your scouts leave and try to bring in new scouts because no one's available and just not enough time. Post draft is when that happens.
Okay. So I mean, do you think anybody, do you think there's some people that maybe have some scouts that have already had their contracts extended, even though there's a new GM in play?
Well, they wouldn't have been extended, but let's say in 2020, you signed a 2 or 3 year deal to re-up as a Steelers scout. And that contract may not be expiring this year, may be expiring next year, for example. But no, nobody whose contract was expiring probably re-up because they knew a new GM was coming.
All right. And I don't think we've seen any changes on the personnel sheet yet, have we?
No, the Steelers site, though, is very slow to update these things. I might have to, and I don't expect anything to happen until the new GM's in place. But I'll have to kind of maybe try to poke around LinkedIn or something because that's usually a good way to get a jump on stuff. But again, just some of the guys who've been here. Dan Mooney Jr., been here for 28, entering his 28th year. Brandon Hunt, 13th year. Phil Kreidler, entering year 32. Mark Bruner, year 13. Dan Colbert, entering year 12. Mark Gorsick, entering year 28. Cheedy, my guy, entering year 10, if you can believe it there. Bruce McNorton, 23. Dave Pettit, 19. It's pretty wild how much continuity there is in that front office. And so that they could really see some changes there.
Okay.
Did you know Mark Gorsick was the GM of the first Pittsburgh arena football team back in the 80s? I didn't know that until recently.
Seemed like I knew that at one time.
What team was the name? Was the Pittsburgh? Wasn't the Maulers? Was it? No, the Pittsburgh Gladiators. Right. It was the original Arena League team back in.
I had probably heard that somewhere along the lines, the way.
87. So maybe I saw that at one point, but that's it. I want to talk to Mark Gorsick, man. That'd be a great guy. I think he'd have some.
I bet he's got some stories, especially from Combine alone.
For sure.
And obviously, and I bet Rick Caprice has got some great tales from the scouting trail as well too.
Yeah, we can tell. We can ask him about every single place he's been because we found him every single place he was this year. Anyway, so that's a long way to say we don't know what's going to happen, and we'll keep you posted. So, one thing we do know what's happening here, some news today, and this is some AFC North talk here. Sam Cook, the Ravens' longtime punter, officially announcing his retirement. Writing appeared to be on the wall after the Ravens drafted Penn State's Jordan Stout in the 4th round of this year's draft. Cook not having his best seasons the last 2 years, numbers were dipping down, so he'll on the verge of age 40 retiring from the NFL.
Good riddance. Really. I mean, that guy seemed like he's been around for 20 years, and a damn good punter as well too. Boy, it seems like Tucker's been over there for 20 years now as well too. Obviously, he hasn't, but and Mike Tomlin was never shy about mentioning Sam Cook during press conferences, and even as I wrote up that later on today, because Mike Tomlin gave a little tip of the hat to Sam Cook on Twitter on Thursday afternoon after he announced his retirement. There, you go back to the last game last season, and during the press conference ahead of that game, Mike Tomlin, he didn't call Cook by name, but basically, but had nothing but praise for the punter. And I think he's named Sam Cook in press conferences more than just a few times over the years as well too. And normally Tomlin doesn't really pay much mind to a punter, when making the other team look like a Super Bowl champion every Tuesday, but he has with Sam Cook there. So, and the writing was on the wall when they drafted the kid out of Penn State earlier this year. And I don't know, those kickers are funny animals, Alex. How's the dynamics going to change on the holder aspect and all like that? I'm not saying, I'm just saying that sometimes you mess with the mechanism in there. Some things can maybe go wrong there. So look, the Penn State punter is a good punter. I think he was the first punter taken in this year's draft. But even so, those are some big shoes to fill there. He's going to have years and years of consistency to make the Ravens forget about having Sam Cook as their punter.
Mm-hmm. Sure, Cook, ninth most punts in NFL history, just under 1,200 of them. So
only one Pro Bowl too. I could have sworn he made more Pro Bowls than that, and he never was first team All Pro either. You know it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I would have bet you money that he had more than one Pro Bowl and that he was at least a first team All Pro, one or two times. But that's not the case there. I don't know. Maybe he only punted good against the Steelers. I don't know, but it sure seemed like he punted very well against the Steelers every game.
Right, I was going to say, if Pittsburgh had a say in a vote, he would have been first team every single year, it felt like. And so we just talked about continuity. How about the continuity of what the Ravens are now replacing? That for so many years, they had Tucker, Cook, and then Morgan Cox as their long snapper. Cox left last year for Tennessee. Now Cook is gone, so now you have just Tucker as last man standing. And so
I'm just saying.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, Stout will have, because everyone thinks about the punting aspect, but no one thinks about the holding aspect.
Right.
So you're right. That's such a crucial thing. Pittsburgh dealt with that this past year. How would Presley Harvin do? Luckily, things seem to work out fine for Boswell, but there is no guarantee. And so Stout's a good one, though. I watched him at Penn State game this year, watched him at the Senior Bowl. I know my very rudimentary evaluation of Stout is that the ball booms off his leg, but off his foot, but he's got a big leg. He can kick and punt. Obviously go punt in Baltimore, but I don't want to celebrate too much here because Jordan Stout could be there for 10 years and it wouldn't surprise me.
Right. And what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson? I don't want this to turn into the Ravens Depot podcast, but gonna be interesting to watch the rest of this offseason play out with him as well too, right?
Yeah, I mean, is he going to get a new deal? Is he not going to get a new? He's a free agent after this year,
I believe, right? So after 2022, right?
Right, and then there's a tag, and he's representing himself, so it's a little more unpredictable about which direction he wants to go. So I don't know. It's a good question.
I mean, he obviously, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 23 million, scheduled to make 23 million. Is he going to play for that?
This year?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, he's not going to hold out.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of forces their hand a little bit there.
In the sense of doing it.
I don't know. I don't think we've heard the last of this is what I'm getting at. And obviously they have all off season to get something done with him. It's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that you're in with him at this point. Because if you do lock him up, you're going to probably be in that $40 million range.
Yeah, that's kind of where the market for new quarterbacks get these days. Probably either really high 30s or low 40s. I
mean, 40 million. He'd probably think he's giving you a discount at 40 million
right.
per. I mean, you got guys. He's probably going to angle for, I don't know, 43, 45 million or more. That and obviously the guarantees that go along with it. The Ravens really got a tough decision on their hands now. Would you lock him up for that? Have you seen enough that you think he can be your quarterback for the next 5 years at least?
Right. Well, I'm glad I don't have to answer that because it's a difficult one. But the question is, if you let Lamar go, how do you replace him? That's a tough one. And he's such an important part. It's such a run first offense, and he's such a dynamic player there. Short answer is, yeah, I think I would lock him up for 40.
I'm not so sure I would. Man, once he loses that running aspect, which obviously the once hasn't come yet. That date hasn't come yet. I think he's going to be a totally different player, but that obviously hasn't happened yet. I'm with you. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. There's been some rumblings. I think Fowler said something that maybe Jackson kind of wants just to go test free agency. Obviously, the tag is a factor. They may prevent him from that, but the idea is maybe Jackson is not super interested in doing a long-term deal with Baltimore.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I'm not sure, but he's probably not happy that Hollywood got traded. That's kind of his guy.
Right.
So I don't know if that's helping matters, but I think Brown wanted out and Baltimore, obliged.
Yeah, he's got to feed that center of his too now.
Be nice. All right. Speaking of potential new contracts,
I think Linderbaum's going to have a great career. It's just we'd like to have fun with those short arm guys.
Right. That's why his weight's so low. He can't feed himself. So
yeah, he's tenacious on tape. So it's going to be interesting to see him playing in the AFC North. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of guys who could get, and in this case, almost certainly will get a new contract, Minkah Fitzpatrick. again, off-season fodder. I think Fowler had a report that this team's going to wait till summer, stop the presses. They're not going to get a deal done till August. That's commonplace. And so I know you're kind of working and burning the midnight oil, Dave, trying to figure out what a deal for Minkah could look like.
Yeah, look, and it's not, I don't think it's too terribly hard to put this thing together either. And Fowler has a unique way of breaking news that's not news. And that's what he essentially did this week. The Steelers won't be in a hurry. They expect to get something done with him. And Minkah's probably going to want to be the highest paid safety in the league moving forward. If any of that's news to you listening to today, welcome back from your deep coma. And we're glad to have you with us. Now, where does that put Minkah? Well, obviously you kind of wonder what's going to happen with Bates between now and, training camp gets underway. Well, really between now and July 15th, because that's the key date when it comes to Bates with the Bengals, because he's on the franchise tag. They have until July 15th to get a long-term deal with him. If they don't, then he has to play under the tag and be done with it. So we'll get our answer on Bates by July 15th. Even if he does get a long-term deal, somebody going to have to be around me to catch me feigning if they make him the highest paid safety in the NFL, because it's just not Mike Brown's MO, especially at that position. You wouldn't expect to see that. So I don't think anything related to Bates is going to be in play when it comes to Minkah Fitzpatrick there, especially guaranteed money, all of it. I just don't think that Bates is going to be a worry. Now, is there any other safety that could potentially, be angling for that big deal at this point? I don't think so. Is there?
I hadn't looked it up, but I can look it up while we're talking right now. Yeah, I agree. Bates, I said last time maybe he's behind Simmons. Maybe he'll be right above Simmons, but either way, I don't think he'll be the top safety. He won't jump Jamal Adams, and so it really won't impact Minkah's situation too much. But let me see what I can find for.
I mean, most of these guys are already locked up, I think. I just don't see anybody as being a threat to become the new highest paid safety in the league, other than Minkah Fitzpatrick at that point. And if that's the case there, obviously Jamal Adams' new money average right now is $17.5 million. Will the Steelers, anywhere between 17.501 and 18 million a year is probably going to be the number. Now, I have worked out kind of the numbers, speculating it being 18 million. When you look at that, when you look at the old money that he has on the table, and people probably saying, old money, what's old money? Minkah is currently wearing the fifth, obviously under the 5th-year option right now at 10.612 million. Okay. So that right now is on the books. That's considered old money for him. All right. So the extension for him will be the new money plus the old money. And the new money is what will average the probably around 18 million. So if you're looking at this potentially being a 4-year extension, which we saw TJ Watt last year, Watt was smart to not have the Steelers be able to get him that under that extra year, despite making him the highest paid player in the league. I would expect Minkah's side to do the same. In other words, fight that this only be a 4-year extension and not a 5-year extension. That way Minkah will have a chance to maybe take one more bite of the apple down the road there. So let's assume this is a 4-year extension for Minkah that he's angling for. And let's assume that it's 18 million per year that he's angling for. 4 times 18 is 72 million. All right. And then you have to add your old money onto it, which is 10.612 million. That brings you to a grand total of 82.612 million new money and old money as part of this. I would think that you would be looking at, with Minkah, around a $21 million signing bonus with him. And potentially, 1 to 2 million, or it would have to be a little bit higher than 1 million because of the minimums are different now. So probably somewhere around 1.5 to $2 million base salary for Minkah in 2022. Specifically, I have him in my latest worksheet as getting a signing bonus of $21,612,000 and a first-year base salary of $2 million. That means he would take home in 2022, tax tag title out the door, $23,612,000 there. His cash flow would probably go somewhere like 38.6 after the second year, and probably the third by the end of 2024. Somewhere in the neighborhood, his cash flow should be 50.6 million or so. Now, if he's angling to get the first 3 years guaranteed, you're looking at this deal. People write this down, see how close I get. The total deal being 82,612 with the fully guaranteed amount being 50,612 overall. That would produce a cap number this year of, where is my cap number here? In Excel, great. 6.3224. So almost not even 6.4 million cap number for him in 2022 as part of this deal, and his current cap number now is 10.612 million. So you're coming away with that from at least a cap reduction of what, 3.3 million, somewhere around there. Nice. Reduction. And you saw last year with Watt that his cap number actually came down a little bit, as a result of his deal. But just looking at the way the Steelers normally do business in these things, and on top of the Watt deal and the amount of guaranteed money on that, I think this is exactly what you're looking at overall. The only question is can Minkah get that 18 million new money average, or will it come in just slightly below that, but yet still on top of the Jamal Adams number?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure he'll be angling for 18, and I think there's a good chance that happens because Fitzpatrick has a case to make that obviously, he'd be the next, he should become the highest paid safety in football. And I think he's a couple rungs better than Jamal Adams. Or different types of safeties a bit. Adams more of a box guy, blitzing type of guy, but pound for pound, to me, Fitzpatrick easily the better safety. You asked the question a couple moments ago, what potential free agents are there? Here's a list of free agents at safety for next year. Bates, of course, being one of them. Jordan Poyer, Jimmy Ward, Adrian Amos, Devin McCourty, other Bengal safety Von Bell. But the name to watch here, Derwin James, going to be a free agent. Had his fifth-year option obviously picked up coming off a Pro Bowl season, was healthy, played really well. So that's a name to watch. Derwin James has a case to be made in terms of the highest paid safety in football.
But he right now, Derwin James is a year behind, though, isn't he? Wait, no, Derwin James is on his fifth-year option now, isn't he? He was drafted in 2018.
Yes.
Okay, so then that is there could be a race to the altar there. So
or wait for the other guy to get to the altar first,
right.
And then you can jump him. So that's James is the big name to watch because obviously he's a defensive player of the year type guy when he's healthy.
Now didn't the Chargers wisely get Bosa to the altar before Watt? Was that a full year before, or was it the same? When was the Bosa deal?
It was before Watt. I don't know if it was the same year, or I want to say it was the same year. This was done in 2020. Okay, so this was a full year before.
Okay, and then Garrett then followed him there. Then,
right.
But wasn't the Bosa deal signed earlier in the offseason, though? Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, August 1st.
Okay, so that's that's after camp started. So, look, I mean, at least there might be some incentive there for the Steelers not to play around here, because if Derwin's probably going to be angling for that kind of money as well, too, isn't he?
Right, probably right about there. It looks like Bosa was maybe late July, so it looks like right at the start of camp, like probably like the first stage. Bosa got his deal done. So yeah, I mean Pittsburgh has typically waited, but again, the other factor is new GM. I mean Kevin Colbert won't be part of this negotiation, so who knows what the new GM might say? Let's lock up Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's a good way to start a GM's career and resume. Again, that's one of those who knows.
And it's not rocket science of what this deal's got to look like. I mean,
right.
there are legal, other things than what we talk about, with offset language and
injury guarantee,
injury guarantees and that kind of stuff. But once again, they're not on foreign land here, and they're not in. It's not like they don't know what the framework of this thing's already going to look like.
Right. To use kind of steal the Tomlin analogy, the landing gear is down. They just want to land the plane, like the runway's in sight.
I mean, they have red paint. Just go ahead and paint the barn red, right?
Right. As long as that red paint's worth $18 million, as Minkah would probably argue.
But, I mean, you make a good point there. I mean, Derwin James is more so than Jesse. I mean, look, like I said, we'll have our answer on Jesse Bates by July 15th anyway. There. Derwin James, has Derwin done enough to be the highest paid safety in the league?
When he's healthy, he's had the injury bug. He was healthy for most of last year. He missed most of the 2020 season, played just 3 games. But last year was a Pro Bowl guy, played in 15 games, big numbers across the board. Okay. So, I mean, if they're going to commit to him, so they can't be like, they can't pull the health card and want to pay him, $17+ million. And so, yeah, short answer, probably yes.
Yeah. So I guess the thing is what if Derwin gets done, early August and does hit the $18 million number,
Yeah, then Minkah's going to want to jump him to at least be like, it's be 18.1 just to say he's the highest paid safety in football. That's good for an agent to be able to tell us.
Right. And obviously the Chargers will probably want it at least capped at 18 million, probably a little bit under that, but
they've been spending money, man. They got J.C. Jackson, $80 million. They trade for Khalil Mack. I mean, I think Tom Telesco's willing to spend the money.
So this shouldn't be hard. Once again, based on $18 million new money value, I think this thing's looking at 4-year extension. The whole deal totaling out $82,612,000. I think you're looking at, like I said, $21.6 million signing bonus right around in there, and a first-year take of around $23,600,000, something along those lines there. Now it's just a matter of getting it done. And I would expect Minkah to show up and do the things that he's supposed to do. But it will probably, until he does get his deal signed, I would expect him to have the practice schedule similar to Watt did.
Will he be there for OTAs, though? I kind of doubt it.
Really? I mean,
was Watt there for OTAs? I don't think Watt was there for OTAs.
What? I don't remember for sure. Was he?
My first thought is that he was not, but I could be wrong about that. We're recording this. It's midnight my time, so.
Yeah, I don't. That's already gotten away from me, and I've released that from my memory banks and all. But obviously, Watt was there at training camp, and I mean, Minkah has been around during the the phase 1 and phase 2, or no, phase 2. I think he missed a.
Was he?
Wasn't he not around for phase 1 when they just doing the stretching, and he showed up like the week after that or something?
Yeah. And regardless of what Watt did or did not do, doesn't mean the Minkah has to follow that. But I think if he gets to camp, he'll do the Holden thing. As in, he'll attend, he'll do some stuff on the side, but he won't actually participate in team until the deal is done. Right.
And I don't blame these athletes nowadays, man. You see these guys. Look at the poor Tariq Cohen the other day, man.
Mm-hmm.
Feel for that kid, guy, and filming his workout, snapped his Achilles. That's it for him now, probably. Period.
Yeah, he's a small guy that's relied on speed, and he's got an ACL and Achilles too.
Came off a knee injury there, so that's it. And people say, why you always take the player side? And because let me tell you, most of these kids don't even get to bite the apple one time, So you get close to that apple, man. I'm protecting them knees and them Achilles.
Yep. Owners are around for decades. Players are around for years. Players got to get theirs when they can get theirs. But Dave, great work there. I'm sure you have not done a post on the numbers you've discussed right now, but I assume one is coming. Correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna let it simmer here a little bit and rework it a few more times and see if I can whittle it down any better. But that should be a pretty good framework overall for what you're looking at with that.
And if Omar Khan is gone, a new hire is made, external GM hire, they should call Dave Bryant, who's also available for parties.
Yeah. Just if I can stay healthy.
Right. Yeah. All right, Dave, anything else you want to talk about Steelers wise, or do you want to get to read your emails and begin wrapping up today's show?
We were going to talk about something else in here, I thought, weren't we?
Were we? I don't have anything written down.
What it was. Let me see if I can find I guess it's not overly.
I think it was Sam Cook that you wanted to mention.
Okay.
I want to say, yeah. But Tuesday starts OTAs for Pittsburgh. Stephon Tuitt, obviously watching that. We talked about that before. The line, I don't want to call it line in the sand, but if he's there, that gives you an answer. If he's not there, that's not a definitive answer, but it's certainly moving you in one direction in terms of will he or won't he play.
I guess people have seen this stuff on. We talked about Bryce Watts getting waived, injured, and all like that. I haven't seen anything new on him getting waived with an injury settlement. The other thing I was going to talk about, why all the pushback on Derek Watt all of a sudden?
Because it's the middle of May and people are bored, and Twitter is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it doesn't bother you. He's at a $2.75 million salary this year. Does it?
No, I think because this all stems from what the Score tweeted out this graphic that Watt is.
Well, it was from a blogger. Okay. They referenced a blogger on that graphic.
Okay, I wasn't sure which came first.
Right,
I wasn't reading it too much.
So they, the blogger didn't fact check, put out bad info, and then the Score jumped on it with a graphic trying to maximize on traffic. I called BS on both of them, and the graphic got deleted.
That was a baller move.
Yeah, old man Dave getting a kill at how old am I now? 54 years of age. That's not bad. And
Tyreek Hill is not 3 inches taller than Kevin. If you were just wondering.
Man, the Steelers Depot crew was dunking all over people this week, weren't they? It was a beautiful thing to see.
It's the only dunk I can do. Put me in the gym, that ain't happening. But anyway,
but when you look at Watt, people want to use, I don't know why people want to look at a cap number. That's not the way that you judge the value of a player, by his cap number. You judge the true value of a player is really his new money average, if you want to get technical about it. And in Watt's case, it's a little over $3 million, because that's the average per year of the 3-year contract that he signed with the Steelers. And to judge a player by his cap number is just silly, because it has no reflection on what that player earns in the season. What the player earns in the season is the salary. And with Watt, it's $2.75 million this year. Now, if you want to just judge him by the average yearly value, that's fine to do as well too. But even that number is just over $3 million there. Look, I understand people are upset that he's not played a lot on offense. They thought they were getting a more contributor at the fullback position, but it's not his fault. He just can't run out on the field whenever he wants to. And I think that the actual number on that, I think he's played 138 offensive snaps in 2 seasons. And I think that's what he averaged per season. He averaged 138 per season prior to coming to the Steelers, and he's played just 138 total in 2 years. So yeah, that's a lot lower than what most of us probably imagine there. But with that said, he is a hell of a special teams player, and people hate to hear that from us year in and year out, Alex, but it's the truth. Special teams core players have value in the NFL, and that value is over $2 million a season.
Right. He was brought in primarily to be a special teamer. That's what his primary role is. That's how I think of him. I think of him in that role more than I do an actual fullback. And again, as you said, the cap illiteracy about what the most important numbers are, the realization that so many of these guys on the Steelers offense are under rookie contracts and things like that, that dust up stuff is all nonsense. We're in a very dead time in the offseason right now, so this is all just par for the course.
What would it take for you to what would it take the rest of this offseason for you to seriously consider cutting Derek Watt?
I hadn't thought about exactly what that looks like. Obviously, it would take Connor Hayward playing very well and getting the majority of the offensive snaps and proving himself as a quality special teamer along with other guys proving they can cut it on special teams as well. It may take, you really want to keep Kevin Rader or some third tight end that emerges for whatever important reason and things like that. Those would probably be the big reasons.
I mean, it's plausible that Watt might not survive the offseason. I mean, it is to some degree plausible, but that plausibility includes Connor Hayward being the next best thing or some other guy on the roster, probably offensive related tight end, fullback, something along those lines, just coming out of nowhere and just really blowing the doors off of one Danny Smith. Right. Plain and simple. And to expect a rookie to be that guy and never playing a snap in the NFL, I mean, it's hard to fathom, man. It really is. So, is it plausible that Watt does not make the 53? Sure, but that, man, the percent possibility of that plausibility just seems super, 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 super low. Obviously, it's a good problem to have if Hayward puts you in a position where you have to think about that, but we're a long ways away from I think that happening.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a better chance that both Watt and Hayward make the 53 than there is Watt not making the 53. I think
that's probably fair. I think there's a chance. I would probably give it slightly better odds that Watt gets cut than you do right now. But again, I'm not thinking about that too much. It really starts with how does Hayward look, and we'll take the conversation from there if we get to that point.
Right. And would you expect if Watt does stick this year that he would play more than, what's he been averaging? What I say, 138 divided by 2. You expect him to play more than 75 snaps, you would think, right?
I mean, maybe a little bit because you're going to see some heavier probably looks this year, some more work under center.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you go back to the first couple of years Ben was in the league, a lot more heavier sets, 2 wide receiver sets, kind of thing.
But Watt is just so limited offensively in terms of the boot game and stuff like that. He almost would prefer a Connor Hayward in that scenario. So yeah, it probably goes up a little bit, but a lot of that's going to be game flow dependent as well. Can you close games out late with the run? How do you want to open games? And so there's some game circumstance that's going to influence his number. But short answer, yeah, I mean, you would expect him to be above the 6% he's averaged in his 2 years in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And he also was hurt that first year in Pittsburgh, but point taken. Obviously, he's not going to be a big part of this offense, regardless. Even if that number goes up 20%, that's not a big chunk of snaps.
And people are looking at him and cutting him because of his cap number. If you cut him, you only save that $2.75 million salary, and then even after roster displacement takes place, let's say it's a rookie, it's what's the base for there, 700 something thousand there, 705,000 from 2.75. I mean, you're roughly just saving $2 million in cap space. You better have a damn good reason for cutting him for that $2 million.
Yeah, so we'll see. But again, I'm not outraged. I'm not sure people were outraged. I'm sure somebody was on the internet because it's the internet, but to me, that was a non-story and a misinterpretation, as you said, of what the relevant and important numbers are when talking about those things.
All right. Ready? I'm surprised my voice has held up this long. Ready to get to some email?
Yep, let's do it.
Let's see here. Joe Glusco writes in, "Hey, Dave and Alex. Joe from York, Pennsylvania. He says, I know the Steelers are great at drafting and developing wide receivers, especially during Ben's tenure. Do you guys think that Ben played a major part in that? Do you think that we will still have the same success with developing receivers without Ben? Thanks. I love the show, guys. Keep up the great work."
It's a really good question, and I know Colbert and Tomlin have pointed it out, and I pointed it out as well, that probably played at least some small factor in the success of drafting receivers when you had a Hall of Fame quarterback throwing to those guys. And so will that track record be the same? We'll get a good look quickly here with Pickens and to a lesser extent Calvin Austin. Also in the future, and if there's a new scouting staff, obviously a new GM, a lot of different variables you're throwing into it. So we'll kind of see.
Yeah, look, I mean, Ben was good, obviously, later on in his career working with wide receivers. But let's hope that the quarterback wasn't the only reason why you were able to develop some receivers,
Right. And it wasn't, but it played a role.
Right. Ben obviously had the routine with the young kids of, making them catch bad balls and all like that. So might be a little less of that happening and all like that. But look, either of these guys can play or they can't. The Steelers have had, somewhat of a good run at the wide receiver position. But let's not lose track too. They've had some misses at the position as well too.
Right, as my Kevin Colbert ranking all the draft pick recap indicates, the Lima Swedes, the Willie Reeds, the rhyming busts, Sammy Coates, et cetera, et cetera. I think Ben...
The Marcus Wheatons.
Right. Wheaton wasn't as bad, though, as the other guys. At least not Reed and Swede. I think Ben sometimes would say he threw you a bad ball just when he actually threw a bad ball and just wanted to cover. He'd be like, yeah, that was on purpose. That's supposed to go 8 feet over your head. I just want to see what your range is. I think Ben used that sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, say it ain't so. Chuck Griffith writes in, Kevin Colbert's last 2 drafts. Dave, the good news 3 weeks ago is that I made it through all 5 stages of grief regarding the Kenny Pickett draft pick before the start of the second round. He says, with the Steelers choosing Pickett over Willis, it is likely to put more fans in the stands in the wake of Big Ben's departure, and each win will be celebrated more and each loss will hurt less for the 4-1-2 Yinzers. He says, so over the last 2 drafts, the Steelers have added Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, and Calvin Austin to their offensive skill positions using only 2 first, 2 second, and a 4th round pick, he says, with at least the next 3 years to play together. And it's not like their first were the number 1 and number 5 in consecutive years. Outside of not adding Creed Humphrey, could they have assembled a better young nucleus on the offensive side of the ball with the draft capital they spent? He says, kudos to Kevin Colbert and the entire franchise for not leaving the cupboard bare for the next GM. Thanks to Steelers defense for all the great coverage. Look, you have to look at each, you have to look at each draft in a vacuum, because if you would have went a different way in the previous draft, and you probably wouldn't have gone that way in this draft, yada, yada. That kind of thing there. But look, I mean, the writing was on the wall, what they had to do anyway, especially in this draft, and that was get at least 1 wide receiver early and get a quarterback early. And they did that. I think we all, even though I was against, this team drafting a running back in the first round last year, that train we saw coming with Harris and Freiermuth, through the pre-draft process there. So it wasn't like we were blindsided by it. And just like, I think the only blindsided part about this year's draft overall, when you talked about offensive skill positions, was that they actually did do 2 receivers and they did draft 1 under 5'10".
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the offensive draft picks has been a clear focus there. I think they've been good overall to answer the question of could you put together a better group, sans Creed Humphrey. What I noted a while back was, they were able to get last year they got the number 1 running back in the class, the first running back off the board and picked 24. They got Freiermuth at 55, the second tight end taken this year. They get the number 1 quarterback, the first quarterback drafted at pick 20. So they've gotten the top guys at the position groups, despite having later, mid to late first round picks and a mid second round pick. So I kind of like that. To the first part of that question about the wins mean more with Pickett, the losses hurt less. No, I mean, what gets butts and seats is winning, regardless whether it's Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Trubisky, somebody else. You win, people will show up. If you don't, they're not going to show up as much. And so that's the thing that matters ultimately. It doesn't. I understand the hometown, the feel good story, and that kind of helps a little bit early on. But if Pickett sucks, they're not going to show up, and they're going to boo him just as they would boo any other quarterback.
I tell you, this team does not make the playoffs this year. Nobody's going to be that positive on what's happened the last 2 drafts.
Right. They're going to say they just took the guy that was next door and they shouldn't have done that. They just wanted to not miss on Marino because, part 2,
the narrative's going to change real quick there. But
not
look,
calculation.
You would hope this defense is better. And I'm going to say this from now until the start of the season. If this team's going to win some games, and make the playoffs this year, it's going to be because of the defense and because their offense gradually comes along and gets better. And by get better, they damn sure better be able to run the football better with the number 1 draft pick at the running back position and the spending that they did on that offensive line this time around there. So if this team makes the playoffs, it's because the defense played a lot better, specifically against the run, and stayed healthy on that side of football as well too. They're going to have to once again be in the league leaders in sacks and yada yada, all that stuff that goes along with it. And then their offense is going to have to start catching up, making up ground midway through the season. And this is going to be a young offense. A lot of guys not being together, So it's going to be a bumpy road, I think, early, regardless of who your quarterback is.
Mm-hmm. Very similar last year. And just as last year, the offensive line was the X factor, it'll basically, again, be the X factor this year. And so that was the most crucial part and does not have a high draft pick invested in it. It has some free agent, James Daniels, and, we'll see what Dan Moore does here too. I'm optimistic. But, yeah, the O-line spotlight very bright on them this year.
Richard Jameson, Derek Watt's cap hit. On your terrible take, May 19th, you said that Derek Watt had the greatest cap hit of $4.7 million of all offensive players, but aren't there 2 offensive players with greater cap hits for 2022? He says, I'm thinking Ben Roethlisberger and Juju Smith, but those guys aren't under contract, Richard. I mean, the whole preface of us talking about the if you want to get technical about it, they're on the dead money sheet with higher cap hits, but the whole preface of this was talking about the players under contract. So if you want to split hairs, let's make everybody happy here, Alex. People like to nitpick here. Ben Roethlisberger, $10.34 million dead money. Juju Smith-Schuster, $5.6 million dead money. Richard, you forgot about Eric Ebron, $3.9 million in dead money there as well too. So if you want to split hairs that way, sure, they have higher cap numbers, but I the whole preface was talking about players under contract, and Roethlisberger and Juju Smith-Schuster and Eric Ebron are not under contract.
Right. I think we all knew what the intent of what Dave was trying to get at was, guys who are on the team.
Yeah, but people try to play gotcha in this thing. But okay, well, there's your number. You are right that Ben Roethlisberger and Juju have higher numbers if you want to talk about players not under contract there. So
right.
Let's move along here, see if we got any more here. Let's see. I think we got most of them there, Alex.
Okay.
I apologize. My voice and all like that. I've been super sick these last few days here. So I'm hopefully by next week I'll sound a lot better or maybe not better, but just back to normal. So within that, Alex, have a good birthday. Have a good time at the Pirates game. These next couple of days, you see Alex buy him a nice bottle of water there. I'm sure he would enjoy that. There you go.
We'll be back, I guess, probably for next Tuesday. Well, I think maybe we'll start doing the Tuesday, Friday thing until things pick up a little bit. I know there's OTAs next week, but probably maybe the rhythm we should get into.
Yeah, more than likely Tuesday morning, unless a GM hire happens or something like that. But plan for us, unless something unexpectedly happens, to be back on Tuesday. Hopefully I'll be much more rested and my voice will be better by then as well too. So I'm going to the doctor on Friday even. So hopefully get going back the right direction. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, hit that on the upper navigational bar as well too. For $25, you can have an ad-free version of the site. So within that, until Tuesday, unless something drastic changes there, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.